Thank you. Okay, so good evening or good day or wherever you are, and welcome to or back to the UX Sanctuary. Obviously, we've been quiet for a long time, but back now, yes. So without further ado, let's get straight to it. UX and Agile. There are a lot of assumptions and misconceptions about this topic, brought on mostly by a lack of understanding of UX or Agile or both. So today's talk, what UX is. So you probably know what that is. What Agile is, everyone thinks they know what Agile is, but most of them have very different ideas, or they think it's everything. How UX and Agile fit together during the project lifecycle, and then there'll be some final wrapping up thoughts and comments, and an opportunity for Q&As. To properly understand Agile, you have to first know a little bit about business and the ugly history that brought Agile into existence. It's centered around the fact that developers were driven towards an impossible deadline by merciless sales, accounts leads, or stakeholders, whilst product owners or project managers demanded or pleaded with them just to deliver something quick before it's too late. But it's always too late. You see, sales and accounts teams are tasked with winning work for an organization. They're incentivized to win it and rewarded for doing so. On the surface, this sounds like a sensible and competitive thing to do, but the client always wants to know upfront, how long will it take and how much will it cost to build and deliver my solution? If you say too long or too much, you can kiss that work goodbye. That sale's gone. So, palatable project times and costs are manufactured and subsequently enforced by people who have neither the data, the skills, or the incentive to guess this right in the first case. They base their times and costs on whatever it takes to win the work. That's their job. So, they can be as belligerent as they like because they have no responsibility for actually delivering what they promised. Nor do they have to experience the consequences of the dumpster fire they cause by promising the impossible in order to win the work. On the contrary, they are celebrated as the good guys. They won the work, and the delivery team is seen as letting everyone down or not being team players if they subsequently use anything as vulgar as reality to push back on it and say it can't be done. Every discipline in the delivery team needs more time than they're given on a project normally. Every discipline in the delivery team encounters unexpected problems and subsequent delays normally, but this is always compounded by sales and accounts over-promising. Every discipline needs and takes additional time to do their work as a result. And despite this timeline being compressed down onto the developers by other teams taking extra time, they're still expected to magically deliver the solution exactly as imagined by the client in exactly the time the accounts team promised. Because no one needs to check it's possible first, am I right? But of course, it's always impossible in that timeline. Angry, blame, and recrimination are thrown around when this reality is finally exposed. Corners are cut everywhere. UX and usability are nearly always the first thing to go because they require thought, intelligence, and testing with users, not with opinionated business stakeholders who can make a quick, agile decision, or who only measure success by the budget we spend and the deadlines we miss. And that all takes time they now know they don't have. Developers are just told they have to deliver something. They work late. Sometimes they work weekends. It becomes a cultural norm and it delivers very little value to the client or the user. It's an old and painfully familiar story for many of us. The project delivery process is very broken and no one suffers more than the development team. So, if the developers can't fix this historic root problem, this endemic behavior, then how do they keep themselves out of the shit, build something acceptable, and actually get time to do the little things in life like see their family or sleep or go to the toilet? Well, funny you should ask. This slide shows why UX is not UI. Apologies. In February 2001, at the lodge in the Snowbird Ski Resort in the Utah mountains, 17 people met to talk. They were representatives from programming, basically. So extreme programming, Scrum, adaptive software development, feature-driven development, and pragmatic programming. All developers, coders to a man. Over 3 days, the group agreed on the manifesto for Agile software development as a methodology to develop software. I'm pronouncing that very carefully because I'm going to come back to this a lot. It's a software development methodology, Agile. At its core, it's stated that in developing, coding a solution, we will try to do the best for the customer because developers are uniquely user-centered, and deliver something timely and tangible as promised. So they were given lip service to the fact that you promised stuff and we will try and deliver something. The truth is, Agile was an expectation management and damage limitation methodology, and it still is. It still doesn't address the underlying and broken process of trying to deliver an impossible promise based only on winning the work. It simply manages the fallout of trying to do so. Agile provides guidelines, 12 principles in fact, the overall purpose of which is to help developers to avoid many of the pitfalls in software development that the authors of the Agile Manifesto experience firsthand themselves, whilst still trying to deliver something useful based on the impossible expectations set for them. Unfortunately, without any real awareness of UX, they attempted to solve project-level problems, problem validation, user needs, usability tests, etc., during the Agile software development part of the project lifecycle. As you can see, not only was this a mistake, but it's too late by then. That's like waiting until the actual race before trying to design and build a winning race car. These things need to be solved well before Agile development starts if the solution's to be successful. If there'd been a better understanding of UX back then, these 12 guidelines would have looked very different. And many of the pitfalls they were designed to address simply wouldn't have existed in the first place. The bottom line is, in modern UX-led projects, the UX is finished before the software development begins. And some of the problems Agile tries to address, all too late, will have already been carried out and resolved in UX, and will thus no longer be necessarily part of the Agile software development process. This doesn't undermine Agile, on the contrary, it accelerates it by removing most of the antithetic Agile tasks and unknowns before development begins. And when I say development, I mean before Agile begins, because it's a software development methodology. But look, this is just me, some UXer telling you guys how Agile should work, right? I mean, why believe me? However obvious it might seem, right? This would be far more credible if the Agile Manifesto signatories had said these things themselves, right? Well, funny you should say that. Clarification of user needs is an essential component. Dr. Jeff Sutherland, Agile Manifesto signatory and co-creator of Scrum, said this, and he's not alone. All of the signatories say the same thing, more or less. It's part of the manifesto itself, but maybe that's not a clear enough example. It's better for the developers to be surfing than writing code that won't be needed. He expressed that if it wasn't clear what should be coded, then it's better if the devs are surfing than writing the wrong code. Failure to follow this advice is demonstrated most commonly when we hear account execs say to the team, "Oh, the client changed their mind again." If the developers are surfing, then who's establishing these user needs? And by extension, what needs to be coded? Well, the UX are, obviously. More importantly, he's clear that it's not the job of the developers to do this. They should be surfing while this is being done. It does not form part of the Agile work because Agile is a software development methodology. The right requirement, and thus the right code, is a requirement for Agile to begin. And of course, he's absolute here. No coding should occur while user needs are in doubt. User needs are in doubt until UX has finished its work. That's the purpose of UX, to establish and clarify the user needs. I doubt any of you are surprised by that statement. And Agile is a software development method. I know I keep saying this, right? It's in the manifesto. It's not a user research methodology or a usability testing methodology or a user needs clarification methodology. Agile cannot start until the user needs are known. I didn't say this. Manifesto signatory said this. And this is a UX responsibility and the output of finished UX. They may not have known much about UX back then, but they knew you couldn't start Agile until this UX task was complete. And being able to cogently state the user needs marks the end of UX. And this all translates quite simply to no software development, and by extension, Agile, should be done until the work is finished. And you can quote me on that because, you know, you really won't be quoting me. You'll be quoting the Agile manifesto signatories. So right, let's turn to something a bit more familiar. What is UX? Well, we all know what UX is, right? I mean, most of us do it for a living. But has anyone ever asked you to describe what you're doing for a living? It's difficult to answer, right? It's hard to crystallize UX down into a sentence, a simple description, or even an elevator pitch. You always feel like you've left loads out. I often say UX is everything. Or what do you think UX is, in order to avoid answering the question? Otherwise, I tend to spend hours passionately describing research, functional architecture, and service design in every detail and scenario in a very animated and excited way. How they intertwine with business, technology, and psychology, digital and physical, how every touch point between every force and every object in the universe is where UX lives. Historically, though, when I do that, people develop a kind of a defensive smile and one twitchy eye, and they start backing towards the door. So over the 2 decades I've been doing this, I've come to realize that you have to go back to the things that make UX unique and uniquely valuable if you're going to tell people what UX is without frightening them. UX is how you define the required functionality around which appropriate technology can be chosen and built. UX is how you discover and research user needs, business value, and technology opportunities using a scientific method. UX is how we draw together all the insights, impacts, and functional requirements of the business, technology, and human domains into a single holistic view. UX is how we create and reliably test functional solutions, physical and digital, as a functional twin, avoiding the wild expense of building them in code before testing, in such a way that they're cheap, accurate, and most valuable. UX guarantees that the end of the solution will be usable, accessible, utilitarian, make the user's lives easier and the business more profitable. And UX delivers more value than any other discipline because it ensures what the business builds is what the user wants and will thus be most willing to pay for. And what's more valuable than that? It is the very definition of successful business. So that's what makes UX unique and valuable. I've had a go at the elevator pitch. As you probably all feel, there's so much more we could say about UX, but there just is no elevator pitch for it. But what does that look like in the project lifecycle with Agile? Because that's why we're here, right? Well, let's start with the project lifecycle. You're probably familiar with these steps. Most projects follow this basic process: discovery, alpha, beta, live. But let's look at it from the perspective of the UX team. So we do discovery and research, then we do functional architecture. You'll notice I name it pre-Agile. Then it goes into build, code, development, Agile, that's what it is, and then live. All projects start with a trigger, a pain point, a problem statement, an opportunity. From that, we discover and understand the requirements, the processes, the business, the goals, the scope, the systems, the users, limitations and opportunities, so much to research. But at the end of that, we now have a working hypothesis for solving the right problem. We can deliver a discovery report. And then we can go on and test, iterate, and prove we have the right solution, that our hypothesis is right. And we do it with the users because it doesn't matter whether we think it's right. At the end of that, of the testing and the iteration, we can say with confidence that we've proven with the user that we have a concept that's ready for build and it will be right first time. Because again, the users have said it is, and it's usable for them. And more importantly, we can say at that point that the user needs are no longer in doubt and UX can come to an end, more or less. And now Agile development can begin in build because the user needs are no longer in doubt. And live, well, live's self-explanatory. So let's go back to the beginning and have a look at some of the things we do. Problem statement validation is more critical to project failure or success than almost any other single thing. Get it right and the project will be a massive success. Get it wrong and the project will be a massive failure. No exceptions. Everything goes right or wrong from here. This is the most common cause of project failure. A problem statement helps us validate that we're addressing a cause and not a symptom. The right scope is addressed, processes, business goals are understood, user needs are understood, and that solving this problem has commercial value. Discovery and research, well, these are the core craft activities. There are additional activities, but I just want to cover the craft today. These deliver the data you need to finish discovery. There are many tools in the discovery and research toolbox, but the process remains the same. I won't be digging into those tools or these tasks today in any depth because they're really not the theme of this talk. Suffice to say that they reveal the technology, landscape, scope, user needs, and value metrics, identifying user types, decision makers, subject matter experts, and they define the required capabilities and use cases. And all of these lead us to user journeys. And user journeys are the absolute crossover point between research and architecture, UX design if you must. Research should end here. Research does end here. Once you know what the to-be user journeys are, then you've finished. You've transitioned from what you understand to what you need to know, to what you need to do. I want to quickly touch on capabilities and use cases because they give us agile epics and stub user stories, and people don't realize this a lot of the time when they're doing it. And this is really, really important in empowering agile without being in it. Capabilities translate directly into epics. Use cases translate directly into user stories. For example, if you had the capability of, say, secure access, right? I want secure access. A user type wants secure access. Well, that's got a number of use cases within it. They'll want to create an account. They want to log in. They want to change password. They want to be able to reset a forgotten password. These are all use cases within it. They're also user stories. Secure access is the epic. And then within it, it'll have a number of user stories, which will be log in, create an account, change password, etc. Use cases also have commensurate user journeys to specify every single step that goes on, which is the user journeys at the top. The reason these are stub user stories is because though we know the functional user journey will exist, the to-be version, we can't yet write the full user story until the user journeys are tested and modified fully. Full user journeys are dependent on researching things like user needs, governance, security, business processes, technology requirements, usability, etc. These are collected collaboratively and tested during the functional architecture phase. And these help us flesh out the functional user stories, unhappy paths, and acceptance tests. We do information architecture, functional prototyping, and usability testing. Then we present and discuss the findings with all those teams involved so that it passes the required user needs, governance, security, business processes, and technology requirements, and it is still usable. This is collaboration in UX. Because UX is something we do with people, not to people. And we iterate. We iterate because the usability tests will often fail. Iteration in the UX architecture phase is quicker, cheaper, more accurate, and carried out often by a single professional UXer, trained not to ask leading questions or fall into the trap of assumptions or cognitive biases, using a single tool that creates an interactive functional twin of the solution. Otherwise, why are you prototyping? We go back, we update the user journeys, the prototypes, and we test again to reflect the findings from our previous tests until it passes. I know I'm preaching to the choir when I tell you all this because you live it, but it's worth mentioning it to keep it at the forefront of your mind as we discuss Agile and UX. And the user journeys don't just tell us what the user will do. They tell us what the systems will need to do, what data they will need to use or show, when these will need to happen, under what circumstances. It's a common fallacy to think the user journeys are only about the user. They also lay out elegant remediation for unhappy paths so that developers know exactly what to do in every eventuality. And once the usability testing is finished, we can say with comprehensive certainty that the functional user stories say what they should, right? That they're correct. We can write them and their acceptance tests, and we know they're correct. Elegant, comprehensive functionality with no holes or nasty surprises for the developers or users. It's great. And most importantly, the user needs are no longer in doubt at this point. But, and here's the big rub, if epics, user stories, acceptance tests, and iteration, all common tasks in Agile, take place in the UX functional architecture phase, what I've labeled as pre-Agile, then is UX actually in Agile after all? Or are these things no longer part of Agile? This is where a lot of confusion arises about UX and Agile. Well, that and the fact that most Agile environments try to shoehorn everything into Agile sprints, whether it's development or not. Remember, Agile is a software development methodology, and we are not developing any software in the research or functional architecture phases. So what's really going on? Well, luckily I don't have to answer that question because the Agile manifesto signatories already answered it for us, didn't they? This line marks the exact point at which UX can say user needs are known. They are no longer in doubt. And as the manifesto signatories said, no coding should occur while user needs are in doubt. And by extension, no Agile. It's also the point at which functional user stories can be written correctly with acceptance tests because we know the user's functional needs are, because we tested and proved them. UX lives here. Agile, as a software development method, lives here in the build phase where you code. It's not supposed to do anything until the user stories lay out what the user needs are, because that's what it uses to begin Agile. And only at this point can we say user needs are no longer in doubt, because remember, no coding should occur while user needs are in doubt. And again, this is the Agile manifesto signatories saying these things, not us, not the UX team. So in conclusion, there are a number of critical project tasks Agile is trying to do too late in the development lifecycle because the Agile manifesto signatories knew they needed to be done, but didn't know UX was there to do those things. So they either tried to develop themselves or dictated that they must be done before development, Agile, begins. UX does those things earlier, more efficiently, cheaper, quicker, and more effectively and professionally. It accelerates Agile and allows developers to confidently rely on the requirements they're given and focus on the right technology, team size, skill sets, estimates, and innovations, the things they're not only good at, but passionate about, all the reasons they love doing development. Developers work better if you give them clear, reliable requirements. Who doesn't? They don't have to worry that, oh, the client changed their minds again. Clients don't change their minds. They simply don't have their problem statement validated properly, or research isn't allowed to do its job, or development, Agile, starts while user needs are still in doubt. Classically, that last one is what happens. None of these problems occur when the project is UX-led and it's finished before Agile, not forced into it. This is how UX and Agile work together successfully, very successfully. Resistance to this change in process comes when Agile proponents and project leaders think of Agile as a religion or as the answer to everything rather than the software development methodology it was created to be. That's not what the signatories of the Agile manifesto or the creators of Scrum intended. And if you read up on what they did and said, you'll see that repeatedly and consistently. So I hope this helps you better understand UX and Agile and defend against those who would undermine the efficacy of your project by forcing UX into Agile, neither of which they probably understand.